Hello? Hello, hello. Oh, that's better. Yeah. Hmm. Nice. Well, we're gonna sit for a bit. So I would say the main key to sitting comfortably for 40 minutes or so is essentially to always be sitting, which is to say always be doing what you're probably doing right now, which is forming your posture, so the usual bases to cover are, well, make sure you feel solidly planted. So if you're sitting in a chair, make sure you're solidly planted. If you're sitting on the mat in some cross-legged posture or seiza, make sure you feel like really like your points of contact with the ground are solid, right? And balanced. So you want to, if you're sitting cross-legged, you want to have kind of the same stress on the same weight on your right knee as your left knee, and similarly with your sit bones, right? And if you're sitting in a chair, it's the same thing. You want to make sure that your feet are solidly on the ground, and that you feel like the pressure on your left and right sit bone is pretty even, right? And you can even sort of visualize lining that up a little bit. Like imagine a string going from your left ear, and I know this is not actually going to work physiologically, but imagine a mental notional string going from your left ear to your right knee, and another one going from your right ear to your left knee. And play with the tension of those strings so that, first of all, you're balanced left and right. But second of all, there's a kind of tension in the upper body posture that wants to be upright, and at the same time wants to be kind of relaxed and have a soft, straightforward bend in the spine, and so on and so forth. So you can play with that. If you let your head float back, that stretches the strings a little bit, but it also makes them more vertical, right? Yeah. Let your head float towards the ceiling. The canonical hand posture, if you want to take it, is put your left palm on top of your right palm, bend your fingers around in a circle, and place that sort of right here, right up against your lower abdomen, with your thumb tips roughly above your navel, and everything else kind of making a big round circle. Or maybe you could even imagine yourself holding a softball or a small cantaloupe, right? Maybe an onion. there, holding it right up against your lower abdomen. And then with respect to the breath, we're going to do a bunch of stuff with the breath this time. I'm going to be doing some prompts around that later. So let's do a little bit of the kind of yogic breathing that is associated with Zazen practice. So you can take a regular breath in, and then on the out breath, sort of firm up the muscles of your lower abdomen and let your breath sort of fall out of the body into your lower abdomen. And then the very bottom of the breath, pause. And then when your diaphragm tells you, just let go of the tension, but keep your sort of energy and your attention down here in your hara, in your lower abdomen, and let the breath just come in. And fill your body with energy. And then again, with a little emphasis and a slight amount of tension in the muscles of your lower abdomen and your pelvic floor, breathe out. And in. So do that a few times. Do it, 3 to 5, maybe 7 times, something like that. And anyway, enough to sort of get a feel for it. And notice a couple of things about it. One is that when you do this, when you bring your attention and you emphasize the out breath a little bit and maybe slightly firm up your lower abdominal muscles, what can happen is that the the tension and misalignment of your upper body can sometimes collapse out of the body with the breath. So it's like it falls away and leaves your posture more upright and kind of energetic. And when you breathe in, that newly upright and energetic posture is sort of, for lack of a better phrase, sort of pumped up a little bit. It fills with the energy of the breath. I said this is anyone who's done a bunch of yoga will recognize this. It's just that it's a little bit less exaggerated, and it doesn't involve locking the throat at all. You want to leave your throat wide open. I mean, I've been locking it a little bit just to make a little bit of noise so that you can hear it through the mic. But basically, you want to leave your throat wide open and and allow the breath to move freely in and out. So to the extent that there's any tension in it, it's all down here in your lower abdomen. Your upper body is pretty relaxed. So just do that a few more times. And we'll sit for a bit, and then I'll have a little bit of, I don't know, additional maybe visualization to do while you're breathing, which will be fun. But let's sit for a while. I would say after exploring that breath technique a bit, you could just let it go and let your breath take its natural course, but maybe keep a little bit of emphasis on the out breath, a little bit of extra attention on the out breath. And a kind of release and allowing on the in breath. So here's something to try if you like. Um, it's sort of a visualization or a sub-vocalization that you can do. It's derived, I think I've talked about this before, but it's derived from a passage in the commentaries on the Blue Cliff record. So whether or not you're doing this sort of focused yogic breathing, become aware of the rhythm and depth of your breath. In the out breath, you can sub-vocalize or somehow otherwise think or feel even just letting go. Let go. Let go of mental activity. Let go of the tension in your body. Let go of literally everything. Except, of course, the minimal sort of muscular tension involved to keep you sitting upright. But even that, it's pretty automatic. You can mostly let it go. And then at the end of the out breath, there's usually this pause where there's very little happening. Things really settle down. And then as the in-breath suggests itself and you allow it to either sub-vocalize or think or just embody, trust completely. Trust the in-breath. Completely trust the sensations that arise. There's nothing to worry about or doubt in there, in any of it. It's just the world arising together as it always does. And with your thoughts, emotions, the same thing. It's just your one unique, marvelous human life playing out as a process in full view. Wonderful. Trust it. And then as the breath turns around, let go. So the effort to keep this in mind is, I would say, subtle and ideally becomes more subtle until it completely tails out to nothing. And it's just letting go and trusting by turns without any effort at all. But that might not happen overnight. So just to practice with it wherever the conditions of the moment allow. And on your next out breath, give your attention to the pause that happens before your breath kind of turns around. Really focus there for a moment. What's happening there? The usual response is, well, not that much, but actually, if you allow it to register, often the amount of sort of mental activity and the kind of emotional content of that activity is pretty turned down at that moment. And what's mostly there is the full range of embodied sensation of being in this body and breathing. Just to bring the attention to that. What is that? What's happening there? What does it feel like? How does it reveal your state of mind? How does it perhaps reveal the sort of emotional and narrative content of the last thought event you were engaged in, right? How does it function? That pause, that mode of engagement. Without working too hard at it, can you step into it, step forward right into it, and let it register, bring a kind of curiosity and acceptance to that stepping forward, that turning toward the experience. To feel the subtle sort of baseline of that mode of engagement and how it plays out, how it supports both sitting and also a kind of equanimous quiet. It clearly doesn't help you pronounce equanimous, though. Just to sit there with nothing to do and wait for the next in-breath to trust. What is it that thus comes? Well, that was lovely. So we should stretch out a little bit. You put your hands behind your back. Clasp your hands either like this or like this, and then bend forward. So you're with your back kind of straight, and then raise your hands to stretch out your shoulders. And back up again. So put your right palm on your left knee, wrap your left hand around behind your back and twist to the left, look over your left shoulder. Keep your back upright and remember to keep breathing. Now the other side. Left palm on the right knee, right arm wrapped around behind your back. Twist to the right, look over your right shoulder. You can feel the stretch all the way down in your psoas and upper quads. All right, it seems good. So I'm curious if anybody has any questions about sitting, what we just did, posture, what do you do with your mind, Zen practice in general, Buddhism in general, any of that stuff. Any burning questions or even unburning questions or comments? Go ahead.
How do you suggest working with fear?
Oh, yeah, really good question. Fear is a natural component of being human, right? There are plenty of really good reasons to be afraid. And interestingly, I mean, here's a story. So, I think I've probably already told this one, but anyway, years ago when I was in college, my first year in college at UC Santa Barbara, my only methodology for getting home from there was hitchhiking, right? And so I would get out on the road and hitchhike. And my girlfriend and I were hitchhiking up here, and we got picked up by this guy who was just completely out of his mind, right? And he had a glove compartment full of prescription pills, which he clearly wasn't taking enough of, and he was a terrible driver, and nonetheless we persisted with him, and finally he got to back in the day there was a freeway that drove in, and some of you will probably even remember this freeway. It was destroyed during the earthquake, but it drove in and it landed on essentially fell in Oak Streets. I forget which direction was which, probably fell or something like that. And he came down off the freeway and he was leaning over the back seat having an argument with me about some totally bogus idea about physics and quantum mechanics that he had. And he wasn't paying any attention at all. And we went through 3 red lights, and then the last red light, some guy came out of the side street and whacked us. And we were probably going 65 miles an hour or maybe less, but we were going really fast. And we went up in the air and we spun around and we like stopped because we ran straight into a light pole. And you know, I was afraid, but at the same time, I have to say, it was the most calm I'd ever felt in my life. You know? It was like every fiber of my being was focused on surviving, and things really settled down and slowed down, and the car danced like I don't know, some sort of Fred Astaire-ish person, right? And landed, and with it was really kind of a transformative experience. And then with everything calmed down, and we got out of the car, and the guy that hit us was really messed up. Everybody in our car was actually okay, but we waited around. Honestly, it didn't take long at all for the police to show up, and they took one look at this guy, and they're like, "Okay, you guys go." And we just walked off the scene of the accident into this kind of, I don't know, strange space, basically. But I mean, so just my point is, there are reasons to be afraid, and there are reasons to be afraid in a bunch of different ways, right? And not all of them. Some of them are surprising, and some of them are sort of what you'd expect, right? But in the context of practice, um, fear, like all other emotional states that are guaranteed to come up, right, during practice, either sitting or walking around and practicing while you're walking around, and so on and so forth. And the request in every case is to let the fact and the process of that emotion is arising register completely in your awareness, and give it all the attention it deserves, and um, the kind of compassionate curiosity and acceptance that it observes, right? That it deserves. And then watch what happens, right? And this is also true for all the other emotions that that sometimes give people trouble, and anger and frustration, and so on and so forth. It's completely possible to sit with or be present with the caring and concern and all the other, sort of factors that give rise to fear, anger, frustration, et cetera, and to experience the heat and power of those emotions, and also experience the sort of poignant and marvelous functioning of a human life, basically. And that's what I'd say, something like that. And my experience is that works pretty well, right? That the trick, if you can call it that, is to have to learn the way in which your everyday experience being all that, I remember once I heard an interview with a psychiatrist who said everyone should experience the full range of human emotions every day. Which is pretty great, right? I mean, it depends on how you define full range of human emotions, but it's a decent ambition, right? So to allow that, and to learn this way in which the actual experience of being alive, and particularly of having something happening, like my favorite example is, an argument with your least favorite colleague at work or something like that, right? Um, the that can act as a prompt to turn toward the full experience, the full embodied experience of being in that state, experiencing that emotions, that set of emotions, spinning out the narrative that's running in your head and all the rest of that sort of thing. And then it's less of this sort of of a default habitual engagement and more of a possibility for skillful and open-ended engagement, right? Anyway, something like that. It's a good question. Anyone else? What time is it? Cool. So I was going to give a quick talk about a koan, which is what I almost always do. So there's this koan has the virtue of being tremendously short. So I thought I'd give a little talk about it and then read a poem, and then we'll see what happens, right? That I wrote more or less specifically for this koan. So the koan goes like this. So a monk asked Dangshan, who is a famous sort of early Tang Dynasty Zen master and the unquestioned founder of the Zen Buddhist school that I'm a sort of, descendant of, basically. And he asked him, what is Buddha? Right? Which is a sort of standard question that gets asked a lot. And Dangshan says, 3 pounds of hemp, which in some ways sounds nonsensical. And if you read the commentaries, the commentary says it categorizes it as flavorless talk, right? In other words, it's so blank that it doesn't give the mind anything to grab onto, and so it may be easy in the presence of that to just drop thinking altogether. Yeah, maybe, right? That's okay, and that's one way of looking at it. There are other ways of looking at it, though. When I read this, I see something about, well, I see a bunch of stuff, but I see something about ordination and priestly life, right? Because, it might actually take about 3 pounds of hemp seed to grow enough cloth to make yourself a robe, right? And when you do that, well, obviously I didn't grow my own fabric. I went to, actually, I don't know where they ordered the fabric for my various robes that I've made. I didn't make this one. This one, and this would be way less than 3 pounds of hemp, but I ordered it from the sort of monastery store in Kyoto that supplies the Soto Zen School with, robe-like things. But I've made all the other ones, and when you do it, it's this amazing experience, right? So you get this big piece of fabric, and most people that start out this process take at least a year, right? So it's cut into all these little strips, right? And you sew the strips together in this particular way, and you use the stitch called the namu kie butsu stitch, which basically it means that you're saying namu kie butsu, namu kie ho, namu kie so every stitch, right? Well, so so you alternate those, and what those are is the refuges in Japanese. So you're saying, I take a refuge in Buddha, I take refuge in Dharma, I take a refuge in Sangha every time you do a stitch. And the stitch is actually, it's a kind of ideally, I mean, you sort of can't see it on this, but ideally it makes these little pinpoints on the face of the robe, right? So you're sewing these very, very long lines of these little pinpoint stitches, and man, is it meditative. and then what happens is, over time, as you know, again, if you're good at it, you can do one of these things in a few months, but most people take at least a year to do it. And particularly your priest robe, where you actually have to do the whole thing yourself, and you sew not only a robe but a bowing mat and something like this as well. Over the course of that year, this thing mysteriously happens where it's as though your life is this river and there are rocks in it, and the rocks kind of move around, and this big one that has to do with your relationship to practice, and your relationship to the kind of literally the fabric of beneficial activity that constitutes the life of Buddhists since time immemorial, Buddhist priests and monks since time immemorial. That relationship shifts around, so that by the time you're done sewing and it's time to do the ceremony in which you're ordained, that rock has moved way closer to the middle of your life, right? And your relationship with it is very different than it was when you started out, which is completely the reason for asking people to sew their own robes, right? And at the end, you have this essentially this object, and you put it on every day, and it carries the weight of that. That effort and the ceremonial sort of frosting that goes along with it, right? It's great. And after going through 3 of these, I did what's known as Jukai, which is your sort of a lay ordination, and then I did a priest ordination, and then I did this thing called Dharma transmission, where the ceremony, by that time you get to that one, the ceremony is essentially 26 days of going around and thanking everything, which further underlines your relationship with the multi-millennial fabric of Buddhist life, right? That's 3 pounds of hemp, right? And you can pick it up and weigh it in your hand, and it carries all of that power, for lack of a better word, and weight, right? And when I years ago, I gave a talk on this, and a friend of mine went out and he got 3 pounds of hemp seed, and he sewed them up in a bag and gave it to me, so I can like, take up my robes, and I can take the 3 pounds of hemp seed, and I can sort of, weigh them out and so on. It's pretty good. And it's tremendously helpful in terms of when I look at the process, the possibility of living in a way that's sort of wakeful and comfortable with the human condition and skillful with it is radically different than it was when I started out, basically. And so here, I thought I wrote a poem about it, for this koan, so I thought I'd read the poem just for fun. Out of the wreckage, the vast sky rains down sweetness everywhere. But like the trees, we do our work mostly in secret and in the dark. An ant traversing a slate countertop So many little steps, subtle waves, lapping on an unknown shore, to apologize to the whole world for everything, every last bit of it. That was the plan. Out of the wreckage, life emerges, stepping out from the shadows to have a look. A mountain swallows the sun, and the road runs down into the dark again. So that's sort of my ordination poem. So any questions about that? Good. So let's sit some more. And then you're going to want a few minutes to do announcements at the end, right? That's great. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming. It was great. I really appreciate it. Aaron, do you have a mic or? Oh, okay. Cool.
Thank you. It was great. Hey, everyone. The mic did make it back to where it belongs after we all had to leave on yesterday because the building next door was on fire. So we had a very exciting day yesterday. We were in here chanting and then had to go outside. And I had the mic in my hand, and then at some point I didn't anymore, but it's good. Ended up back there. So I just want to tell you guys a little bit about Alembic and what we have coming up this coming week. So how many of you are you sitting here for the first time tonight? Hi, welcome. So alembic is, as you may know, an alembic is an alchemical vessel for transformation. It's a sacred container where mind and matter meet and transform. And that's our aspiration for this place. So we have about 9 regular weekly classes, including this one. And then we have special events almost every weekend. We don't catch the building on fire every weekend. That's a very special event. But this coming weekend, we have 3 wildly different things that I'm going to tell you about. The one on Sunday, I think, may be particularly of interest to you if you like to sit in this way. And that is a full day from 10 to 4 on non-sleep deep rest. Do you guys know what that is? Yeah, some of you. So Kelly Boys is the teacher of that. So she's on the Waking Up app, and she taught here for a while, and then she got very famous. Not to say we did that, but not to not say that either. So she'll be here. She's traveling all around the world, but she'll be here all day on Sunday teaching us how to do non-sleep deep rest. It is a very powerful non-dual meditation practice during which it is also okay if you fall asleep. So it's very good. It's got all the things. So that's on Sunday. On Friday night, we have Adam Robert, who's the founder of The Side View, which is a really cool magazine that came out in 2020, talking about everyday philosophy, philosophy in the world, philosophy as a way of life. And if you know who Eric Davis is, he's one of the other founders of this place. Eric brought Adam in, and Adam's going to give a little talk. And then he and Eric are going to kind of dialogue for a little while before they open it up to the audience for questions. That's Friday evening. So if you have a friend who doesn't meditate but is a smart cookie and you want to bring them here, that would be a good thing to bring them to. And then Saturday we're doing maybe I don't know if it's certainly not the weirdest thing we've ever done, but it's pretty weird. It's highly experimental. We have an event Saturday night called Tell Me Everything, Now Stop Talking. And it's with Misha Globerman, who's visiting from Toronto, and he has a reputation for being a very good MC. And we're going to take a volunteer, and we're going to pull them up here, and we're going to spend 12 minutes. Anyone in the audience can ask them any question they want. And Misha is going to take the question and kind of raise the stakes on the question and then throw it to the person. And so we have 12 minutes to get to know someone as best we can. And he's going to teach us that. And then we're going to break up into groups of 4 and do that. So you could bring your extrovert friends to that, or your introvert friends who really should get out more can go to that. So that's all coming up this weekend. So I hope to see some of you at some of those things. I will be at all of those things. So I hope to see you guys there. And thanks for being here tonight. Stay for tea if you'd like. There's tea and cookies in the lobby. And thank you all for being here. Thank you, Zachary.